Planet Earth is a world in flux. No two chapters of its history have been quite the same, and the species that lived and died in ancient ecosystems will never come again. The very spot you find yourself in right now may have been, at various times over the last 4.5 billion years, a scorching desert, a frozen tundra, a lush and teeming rainforest, or a desolate wasteland. And the little patch of our planet that you call home has also been home to countless life forms before you, some more strange and awe-inspiring than it's possible to easily imagine. And many that you're very lucky you don't have to share your environment with today. Change is the only constant in natural history, but the draw of deep time is strong. And we're innately curious to understand what those ancient days were like, to smell their air, to drink their water, to explore their land, to encounter their species, and to face their challenges. In our visits to those long-lost worlds so far, we've done just that, and learned a lot about both our planet and ourselves in the process. But on this episode of Eons Surviving Deep Time, we'll be taking on some things that you've been curious about by answering questions submitted by our audience. Hello, and welcome to Eons Surviving Deep Time, a podcast that gives you a human's eye view of what trying to survive in the past might have looked like. I'm Callie Moore, one of the hosts of PBS Eons, a YouTube channel about the history of life on Earth, and I'm here with Michelle Barboza Ramirez, Gabriel Santos, and Blake DiPastino to answer your questions. Hello, my fellow co-hosts. Are you ready to answer some questions?
Hey, Callie.
Let's go.
Am I ready? Ish.
Yeah. It's all relative. Well, we have quite a few questions from both our patrons and just our listeners and watchers, viewers, I guess. So we're going to try to make it through as many as we can today. So let's start off with probably one of my favorite questions that we got from you all. It's from our patron, John Celo, Celie. I hope I said that right. Anyways, the question is there any way to know if Smilodons purred? Like, I know.
That's precious.
Isn't it so precious? So what do you guys think before I reveal the answer? Do you think that Smilodons could purr?
The only way to know is if you scratch their tummy. Right?
You find out, but you never live to tell the tale. So.
Right? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's a quick way to lose your neck.
Well, I remember, I can't remember if it was SciShow or if it was Eons, and we're working on one of those scripts. I learned that true cats with a capital C or whatever, like they roar. So did Smilodon roar?
Right. Yeah, because like what cheetahs can't roar. They do those little chirps.
Yeah.
Pew, pew, or whatever. That's my cheetah.
So cheetahs aren't cat? You know what I mean? Like, am I getting that wrong?
Cheetahs aren't big cats.
They're not big cats. Okay.
But they're not.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
They're on a little side branch because they have so much weirdness.
Taxonomy, man.
Taxonomy.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
Okay. So there was a study done in 2023. They compared the hyoid bones of Smilodon fatalis, that's the most famous of the saber-toothed cats, and Panthera atrox, which is the American lion from the La Brea tar pits, to each other. So they compared those two kitties. And the two groups of living cats, big roaring cats, so here you go, Blake, the lions and tigers, and the little purring cats. These would be like cougars and lynxes. And I'm just going to throw your big old fat house cats in there for fun because why not?
So
but
big cats don't purr?
Undoubtedly not. But so Smilodon is interesting because roaring cats have 7 hyoid bones and purring cats have 9. Smilodon has 7, but they're shaped more like the ones purring cats have. So the researchers think they might have purred, but at a lower frequency than the purring cats today, as their hyoid bones are larger and more robust than those of living purring cats. So, like, maybe?
That's
I hope
so
they
cool.
do. I hope they do.
Well, that's paleontology for you. It's always maybes.
It's fun to think about a big saber-toothed cat purring, even if it is at a lower frequency than today. Which makes me think, like, sometimes cats, like, they purr to, like, help fix injuries, like, heal themselves. Like, that wavelength is therapeutic. So I wonder if they do purr at a lower wavelength, do they also heal differently than modern cats?
Because we've done episodes on that, right? About Smilodon possibly being a pack hunter, because we found them with injuries that if they were solo, if you have that injury, you won't be able to hunt, you won't be able to eat, you're out. But knowing that type of grievous injury healed, someone was taking care of them, and maybe they were purring themselves better.
Aw,
So
that's the cutest.
It's so sweet. So maybe.
It could even just be like for their mental health too. Like, there's that Smilodon with the bone disease from the tar pits, and we know that was living. So maybe it was just like a special kind of comfort song.
If Smilodon can prioritize mental health, so can you. That's my takeaway.
Call out right there.
Okay, so let's go on to question 2. This is from Theo. What is your favorite plant from the geological past? Would you want to go see all of the extinct ginkgos? So do you guys have a favorite plant of the ancient past?
Yes. So I love ferns in general. For those people on Eons may know that I did that Pteridamania TikTok. But there's the seed ferns from the Carboniferous and the Permian, and they're completely extinct today. So those are the plants that I probably would want to go see, just because they're so weird, right? They're ferns, but they produce seeds. They have no living descendants, and I can include them in my fern list of things that I've seen. So I definitely would want to go.
You have a fern list, Gabe?
Yes.
That's precious.
Who needs birds when you got ferns?
I was going to say, I thought I was nerdy with my little bird list, but you have a fern list. Wow. Okay, I will say that Gabe's terrarium mania did inspire my first thought, which was Cooksonia, because I can't really keep plants alive. But if I was able to time travel, I would bring Gabe back a little Cooksonia, because I know that he could make a precious little terrarium, and he'd probably put a Bulbasaur in there or something adorable. So it would be my gift to him for us.
That's
Thank you.
So cute. I would like to also see Cooksinia as well.
Yeah, it's like one of the first vascular plants, if I remember correctly, or right around that transition point. I want to say late Silurian, early Devonian. So it's, one of the other thoughts I had was like horsetail, because I was thinking from teacher perspective. I love showing horsetail fossils because we have horsetails up here in the Pacific Northwest, and they look basically exactly the same, right? And so it's really cool to see how you can find a flat 3D fossil and really understand what you're looking at. But in terms of going there, like our podcast is doing, then Cooksonia, because we have that little 2D image, but we don't really know much about it beyond that. So to be able to actually study that and possibly have my friend create a cute terrarium around it, then I vote Cooksonia.
I vote that too.
How about you, Blake?
Speaking of things that exist now and also existed then, we do have horsetails here, but I remember seeing fossils of palms in the Morrison Formation in Wyoming, like at Fossil Butte. And Eocene palms, and their fossils are pristine, and they look exactly the way palms do today. But that makes me want to see them then also, to compare and contrast, and also just to see Wyoming when it was tropical, like beachfront property.
For sure. Yep. Yeah, those are all great plants. I'm kind of in between. I would love to see the giant horsetails, the calamites, like MB was describing, because just a giant horsetail, really, what? Like a 10-foot tall horsetail? That just sounds wild to me. Also, they looked really weird. Equisetum is another one that got really big in the Carboniferous. It's a very, very common wetland plant today. But I might have to go with Glossopleura from the Permian, the tongue-leafed tree thing that we are very, very confused about, but it's all over Gondwana, the southern hemisphere during the Permian, and I would love to get the full view of a Glossopleura. We have tons and tons and tons of leaves, but I don't feel like we have a lot of the rest of the plant. So yeah, that would be really cool to just get to see it all together.
And I know this is cheating because it's not a plant, but the giant fungi from the Silurian, the prototaxites. I mean,
that's what I was going to say too.
I was going to say that too.
It's not a plant, it's a fungi, but they're big, they're weird, they're old. I want to go walk amongst them, please.
I would love that too.
Well, if we're talking forest, though, one thing that's not a specific plant that I want to go see would be the ancient fern forests of Antarctica, right? Just because, we know of Antarctica today as cold, icy, right? Complex landscape, but thinking about the fern forests of millions and millions of years ago and seeing how different it could be would just I probably would cry just seeing the beauty and majesty of that kind of landscape. It would just be incredible. And of course, I'd just be surrounded by ferns and I could just be happy for all eternity.
And your fern list would be done. It would be complete.
Well, it would never be complete. Because then there's future ferns too.
Oh, interesting.
Ooh.
All of the Carboniferous, though. I mean, that's something that we're often asked, right? If you can go back any time, when would it be? And for me, it's the Carboniferous for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't, like MB, I can't keep a plant alive, but I love that for them.
My plants are surviving, but they are not thriving. That's I feel really bad. I just need to give them away, but I feel like a responsibility to keep them going, but they are definitely not thriving.
Terrariums, microclimates, it's the way to do.
The 7-degree weather you're in might not be ideal for your Monstera or whatever's in your apartment.
It's a little chilly here. It's a little chilly here. In Missoula, that's where we're at. So our third question comes from Seamus Yosarian, and there was actually a whole bunch of other folks who asked kind of a similar question about things that have to do with microbes and contaminating the past, like patrons James H., Callie Q., along with Richard Hart and Tomas. So in which geological era do we believe viruses began? And would there be a way to prevent us from getting deadly viral diseases in past eras? Or would we just have to hope we don't get anything? So thoughts on that question?
I think that's like a big roll of the dice because of the way that viruses work, right? A lot of them are specific to species. It's kind of rare for them to evolve to be able to transfer over. It does happen, but it's not, immediate. So if we were to go back into the past, would those viruses be able to recognize us as hosts? Do we have like that unique set of proteins or whatever that they need to identify? So I think it's a big roll of the dice if we go back and then there's a virus and like, oh, cool, this is new. Let's infect that. But at the same time, even if we were to bring whatever our biome has, it could cause ecological disaster. Like we see that today happening all the time. And so it's a big if and or maybe.
Yeah, like Homer Simpson with the time traveling toaster and he sneezes on the dinosaur. A lot of the episodes that we did on this podcast, we kind of ignored this problem. We didn't really think about it too much because, again, if we're going back too old, is it just all vertebrates could be infected by this? But we did get a little bit more into it during the Cenozoic when there's other hominids around, because now we're in the family tree, so things could definitely get us. And we actually did a video about this, about where viruses came from back in 2018. It's literally called Where Did Viruses Come From? So it's very easy to find. Yeah. And they could be potentially very old, depending on which origin hypothesis you go with, at least as old as the first cells, which emerged around 4 billion with a B years ago. But viruses could even be older, existing in the pre-cellular world as self-replicating entities that subsequently evolved into forms that parasitized other cells. So, I mean, we could be definitely threatened by viruses. But
yeah, I would say initially my feeling was like, if it's primates onwards, I'm a little worried. If it's like mammals onwards, like maybe even synapsids. But before that, I wasn't feeling too worried. But now you're talking about viruses that could affect like Luca, which is the last universal common ancestor. And if it's got that, I'm a descendant of that. So I don't know. Maybe it has figured out some real primal part of my body to code into.
Yeah.
So thanks. Now I am a little hesitant.
I know.
Before,
and-
I was just free running through time.
right? And we didn't have to worry about anything, and now we possibly do have to worry about it.
We did an episode about HSV 1 and 2, I believe. Or was that the same episode? I can't remember. And so that goes back to our common ancestor with chimps. And so I'm with MB, like anything primates and like further out on our branch of the tree, you're in the danger zone, right? But like, what if we go back farther than that ancestor? Like Gabe was saying, the protein matrix, if you will, is so different that I feel like I like those odds better is what I'm saying.
So yeah, we might have had to deal with it at a certain point. We would definitely have to deal with viruses, but like, what about their origins? And there's about 3 different hypotheses for where viruses came from. There's the virus first hypothesis that viruses descended from primitive pre-cellular life forms, and that they originated and evolved along with the primitive self-replicating molecules that were destined to become cells at some time. And the agents we recognize as viruses today were originally self-replicating molecules in the pre-cellular world. Whew.
Oh, that's so weird.
I know. And I mean, viruses are weird anyways. Like, are they technically alive? Are they things?
Right.
Are they not alive? Are they? Yeah. Oh my goodness. They're just weird things.
Yeah, the fact that we can study that through paleontology is fascinating. I mean, obviously now we're starting to get genetic data, but like we have found fossils of microscopic unicellular things. Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
So viruses are escaped cellular genetic elements, and this theory says that viruses evolved after cells, and their origins were cell-associated genetic elements that acquired protein coats, allowing for more efficient cell-to-cell transfer. And then the last one is regressive hypothesis. This is like a retrograde evolution that states that viruses were once complex intracellular parasites that lost the ability for all independent metabolism, and they retained only those genes required to manipulate the host cell and produce progeny virons.
What
oh
a
my
jerk
gosh.
move.
So a whole bunch of awful ways to start. I
know.
feel like just kind of keeping with their whole vibe. But yeah, different viral lineages might have different origins too. So it's really
I was going to say, could
say.
it be all of them, right?
Yeah.
Sure. We may never know. But we at least have some hypotheses to play with, at least.
I feel like if I had to vote, hypothesis number 2 makes the most sense to me, just because they're so good at what they do, right? They co-evolve with cells, and so it seems to make sense to me that like they're so well equipped to infect cells that they must have come from them.
Sure. Why not? Why not? I'm definitely not a virologist or microbiologist. They all sound great to me because I'm glad I have the words in front of me. So what about catching viruses while we're time traveling? Like that's a big, I'm sure a lot of people wondered that. And we had wondered that aloud on several episodes. So the most important thing I guess that we could do is stay up to date on our vaccinations. So whatever series of shots that you need to get to travel to any other part of our modern world, we should probably get before we travel back into the past, just to cover our bases a little bit. But really, the underlying question here boils down to, do we know what deadly viral diseases existed in deep time? And is there even a way to know this? If we don't know what existed, it's kind of hard, to prevent catching it. But we do know about some that did exist, which, I mean, a lot of these might be easy not to catch. But so we've got the pandemic that lasted 15 million years. Some kind of mammal got infected with some kind of virus about 33 million years ago, and then it stuck around for about 15 million years ago.
It was the Eons team.
Yeah,
it was us. Not. We're not going there. They can't blame us.
Right. Surviving Deep Time podcast.
Some kind of mammal.
Some kind.
Fishy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On those who will not be named. So it independently infected different mammal species and then embedded itself in their genome multiple times. So definitely if we went back 33 to 15 million years ago, we might have to watch out for whatever this scary little virus was.
Right. So that's what you get for traveling back in the Cenozoic. Like I was saying before, the farther back you go, I feel like the safer we would be.
Yeah, agreed. I think so too.
That's what you get.
And us humans have 2 different fossils of this endogenous retrovirus. It's called ERV-FC. It probably has some way better catchy term, but I'm not going to try it. In our DNA, and as far as we know, neither of them do anything now, but they probably did something before. The older one comes from an infection in the common ancestors of all great apes. Eek! Sometime between 20 million and 16 million years ago. And the younger one we got from the common ancestor of all African great apes between about 16 million and 9 million years ago. So not much that we can do to prevent this in our scenario. We don't even know what kind of viral illness this infection may have caused, but there was definitely something around. So you're right. Avoid the Cenozoic.
Right. Yeah.
We'll just make sure we wash our hands and we bring some masks with us as we do exploration.
But do we even know how it's spread? Because masks are great if it's airborne, but what if it's like on the fruit that we see on that tree and we're like, yum, yum, yum. I don't like.
That's why we wash our food first. Are you just going to pick a fruit off a tree and be like, yummy, and I'm just going to eat it?
I've seen them do that, yes.
Yeah.
Foraging.
I don't know. Man, there's so many. This question makes me way more worried about going back into the past for sure. But there's also another one. There's other viruses that we know about, and I think these are a little bit easier to avoid. And it's the 2 viruses that we've had for millions of years. Again, Eons episode, and that's herpes, HSV1 and HSV2 specifically, which cause oral herpes and genital herpes, respectively.
Quite preventable.
Quite preventable.
Don't fall in love when you time travel.
No, especially not
Can't
with your
me.
close hominin relatives. So just kind of avoid other hominins and apes in general, because we know that we can pass on respiratory viruses to chimps today. So also we need to protect our ancestors and not cause something that kills everybody, and then we just disappear in some time traveling paradox. So
wow. That's interesting.
I'm going to wear a full clean suit if we go back in time.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm rethinking all of my, like, what would you bring with you? Clean suit.
Yeah.
I'm just going to look like a Quarian.
Less fun now.
Walking around in your
it would still
bubble.
be fun because then we can look like Quarians from Mass Effect, like a cool alien video game. We're just walking around in these suits. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be full on sci-fi now. It's even better.
It will be definitely very sci-fi.
You'll have to take back a lot of Purell when we go back there.
But some viruses are like resistant to that today. So who knows what actually
if we start building up that resistance a couple million years ago, that's not good. But again, like avoid the Cenozoic. She's overrated. She's dangerous.
Right.
Getting stomped on a dinosaur is easier to avoid than breathing in some virus from your hominid ancestor.
Yeah.
Right? All right, now that we're all terrified of getting something and giving something in the past, let's take another question from Lily Dell. When you go into different forests today, they often have very unique smells amongst each other. What do you think certain forests or ecosystems of the Carboniferous or Permian would smell like? Would it be unlike any smells today because of the different plants and animals? And do you think it would be stinky or pleasant?
I'm hoping it will be the most pleasant smell. Like today, when I opened my terrariums, there's this beautiful, like earthy perfume from the moss and everything that just smells so clean and fresh. That's what I want to imagine things will smell like. Now, if I walk by a dead, decaying animal in the Carboniferous or whatever, that might change the sense a little bit. But overall, I'm hoping it's going to smell like so awesome that I'm going to want to bottle it and turn it into a candle that I can sell.
You bring up a really good point, though, Gabe, because in the Carboniferous, we don't have decomposers yet, right? Like every tree that falls down is just laying there. It's not actively decaying. So the decay smells will be from animals, not plants. If you just kind of avoid the animal areas, because in the Carboniferous, we don't have any animals that are amniotes yet. So if you move far away enough from water, it's just going to be plants. And if we're thinking about and insects, if we're thinking pre-flowering plants, right, where we've just got spore reproducing plants, I'm almost feeling like it's kind of like these PNW forests in the wintertime. Our flowering plants are dormant. We've got our ferns, we've got our pines. Like, I'm imagining a very lovely little stroll as well. And since we've already been terrified of viruses, let me have my plant person time and think it's going to be so lovely. I think she'll be a real nice stroll with a real nice smell.
Wait, so MB, are you saying that there were... So I was going to make the same remark about the lack of decomposers for plants, but were there decomposers for animals in the Carboniferous, say?
I would think so. And also there were decomposers. They just weren't working as fast as they do now.
I see.
So it was just a little bit slow. But I don't know if you guys have ever smelled, like, you know, the grass piles, like everybody rakes up their grass and then it just sits there in the hot summer sun and it stinks. They stink.
Grass or if you've won't evolve for another 400 million years.
I'm just using grass as an example. Or just like a big pile of organic material, like, you know, your compost pile. That stinks. That stinks. Decaying anything stinks. Or if you've ever brought up that black mud from like the bottom of a lake and it just is putrid smelling, I think you guys forget that a lot of the Carboniferous was swamps. And there's a thing called swamp gas. And there's a lot of sulfur. I don't think the Carboniferous would have smelled good at all. I think it would have smelled horrifically bad in a lot of places. If you got up on a high, breezy area, I'm sure it would be nice. But if you were right down in that swamp, it's going to be like the Florida Everglades. And there is definitely a musk in the Florida.
I mean, I used to live near the Florida swamps. You kind of acclimate to it. It becomes its own little vibe.
You know, when I go to hot springs and it's got a lot of sulfur in it, it's only like the first, 15 minutes that I can actually smell it. But those first 15 minutes are going to be like stings the nostrils, like it's going to be a little rough, I think.
But doesn't that swamp gas come from decomposers?
Yeah, well, you'd have just the lack of decomposers. You'd have a bunch of rotting plant material. I mean, rotting anything. If I say rotting, I'm not like, ooh, fresh flowers. Like, it's gross. It smells gross. Rotting smells gross no matter what type of rot you got. So I worry that the Carboniferous would smell pretty bad. On the Permian end, I bet the first part of the Permian would smell pretty good, but then the end Permian would be... Oof.
No, thanks.
No, that would be a walking disaster. I mean, literally, but it would smell
like worse
so
than
bad.
Spokane in the winter.
It's like Middle Ages before plumbing, before moving the cemeteries out of the middle of town for 900 years. It would be...
Well, we could take the same Middle Ages approach and make those, those little beak masks and fill it with the
plague
fresh
doctor mask
plants. Yeah, the plague doctor mask. They would stuff the fresh little herbs. Obviously, there's no herbs, but if we put in just some fresh pine needles or ferns, and then I can walk around looking. Okay, so I've got the sci-fi outfit to protect me from the plague, but then I've also got the plague mask to protect me from the smell. Our time travel kit is getting way off kilter.
I can visualize it. Yeah. It's a whole look.
Yeah. It's a very, it is definitely a vibe, that's for sure. But moving into the future, the future of the past, I guess, we get angiosperms. The common ancestor of most of the living angiosperms probably existed anywhere from 250 to 140 million years ago. But the earliest known fossil we get of crown angiosperms, so that's the group that we have around today, dates to the early Cretaceous, about 135. So by the time we get to the late Cretaceous, we probably have flowers. And they might smell. They are trying to get pollinators, so it might smell good by the late Cretaceous. I don't know. If you avoid piles of dino poop and stuff, I think you might be all right. The main answer to that question is it depends on where you're at and how bad it's going to smell. So there's probably some really bad smelling periods of time, and there probably is some pretty fresh, nice places. But let's go on to our next question. This is from Axel. What is deep time?
Whoa.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. So, MB, if one of your students were to raise their hand and be like, hello, what's deep time? What answer would you give your students?
Interesting.
Okay, well, we literally just did this lecture in class last week because the semester just started. And I think in order to understand anything in terms of geology or the earth or paleontology, we need to understand deep time. Because when we think about time, we think in terms of like days or months or years. And sometimes we even get good enough to think about like the Middle Ages, which is centuries, or sometimes even thousands of years. But once you get past, honestly, like a million years, things start to add up. Like if you don't know anything about paleontology and I tell you something happened a million years ago versus 20 million versus 200 million, I think it's really hard for folks to conceptualize what that even means on those exponential scales. Like, what does it even matter, right? How do we tell that apart? So I do this lab with my students where we take 4.5 meter long piece of receipt paper for our 4.5 million years that the Earth, I'm sorry, billion years. See, you wouldn't have known the difference if you don't know deep time. The 4.5 billion years of deep time. And I have them map out like all these events in Earth history. And they start off with like the formation of the Earth. And then they go like a meter deep and they're like, there's nothing happening. We have a thing called the boring billion. And yeah, like 80% of our entire planet's existence was just kind of Earth trying to like equilibrate and like settle down. And then by the time they get to the end of this little piece of paper, like dinosaurs and humans are basically like smashed next to each other. So understanding deep time is like getting a sense of scale of what do all these numbers actually mean in relation to each other, right? Like I think a lot of our Eons listeners have heard that we live closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex live to Stegosaurus, right? Like they have a bigger gap because humans, or let's say even hominids, have only been around, that's averaged like 8 million years. Whereas dinosaurs, the non-avians, from 250 million years ago to 66. So they were around for over 100 million years, right? Like understanding those timescales and being able to see that move just gives us that context, that the relative time and relative space. Otherwise, it's just a jumble of facts. But to give those facts meaning, you need to be able to see where they fit in with each other.
Right.
Yeah. That's an excellent answer. The way I
is what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I describe it sometimes is like deep time becomes like monopoly money. Like it's all just sort of, there's so much of it that it's just kind of like, is it 100,000 or is it a million? Like, I guess you reach a point where it doesn't really seem to make a difference. And that's when like time becomes deep, when we reach that point that MB is talking about, where like we can't grasp it because we live on such short time scales that it becomes monopoly money. You know what I mean? And I think it's in the neighborhood of like a million. Like our species is what, 300,000 years old? Like that's graspable, I think, because we can think in order of thousands of years. But, you know, once you get to a million, it's just sort of like, wait, T-Rex and Stegosaurus, they didn't cohabitate? You know what I mean?
Yeah. What's the difference?
There's also that sense of perspective that we have to include with deep time for ourselves, right? Like I do a similar thing with our visitors at the museum when we teach them about timescales, right? We do the arm thing. We're like, okay, humans are at the very, very tip of your fingernail, and you talk about all the different portions of time that way. But it's also important to remind them, like, even though our time scale that we see things is this really, really short blink, having that perspective of like all these millions or billions of years of events that led to us occurring right now doesn't make our moment of time insignificant. We still have lasting impressions on the world around us based on our decisions. And so I think that portion of deep time, not just scales, but the perspective is so important to understand, like all the millions of years that led to your existence and everything that leads after is still going to be important with all the decisions you make today. So I think that's a really big part of it when it comes to deep time, is not just the scale, but the perspective of who we are in all of it as well.
Yeah, so essentially the time scale over which geological events happen versus the time scale over which humans events happen. So yeah, just like that, being able to look back in deep time and compartmentalizing all of these billions of years is deep time.
That's an excellent question, though.
There's this saying from when I was learning physics. I didn't learn it very well, but it said, if you understand quantum physics, then you actually don't understand it. And when I'm thinking about deep time, I'm like, if you're not starting to have a little bit of an existential crisis,
right,
understanding just how long time scales are and like getting that perspective, then I don't know if you are actually understanding deep time.
Agreed.
Just trigger a small existential crisis and you're on the right path.
Yep. All right, on to the next. This next question is from Neil. What if a group of people traveled back in time? Could they establish a civilization with the dangers and resources of the period?
This is a show.
I would watch the heck out of it. Yeah.
Here's the thing.
We should bitch
I
this
think
Netflix.
they're talking about could that continue going, right? And if you have a group of 4 people, that gene pool is way too small, methinks, for that to be a viable population that's going to survive. When like Kelly and I were building our treetop canopy in the Triassic, like, yeah, we'll be fine for like a couple years, and then we die. Our stuff never gets fossilized. You'll never know we were there. But like, would we be able to continue a thriving population?
That's interesting.
No, I don't think so.
That's a good point. I was thinking about more as like an archaeology question rather than a paleontology question, right? And like the history of human culture as evidenced through science, and like what would we need, or what constitutes a civilization? So in that case, it's not so much a matter of how many people, but like it's sort of like deep time. Like at what point could you say that we have a new society or a new civilization, right? When do you reach that threshold?
Right. So we'll add to this to make it a little easier. What if a viable population of humans went back? So that's probably anywhere from like 150 to 300 people to keep the gene pool fresh.
That's less than I thought.
So yeah, I know. Just think of all those royal lineages that are still around that kind of have a circle for a family tree. You know, we can do a lot with a little. But so we have a viable population that goes back. I think civilization to me kind of means a stable place. Like we aren't moving around. We are not hunter and gatherers. We have buildings and we make the food for us. We don't go out and get the food much anymore. So we got animals that we raise and slaughter. We have crops that we grow and harvest. We make our own wares. We are in a place. We are a civilization. And some time periods, I don't think there's enough resources to handle that many people. Like, what are you going to do? Raise lungfish, in the Ordovician? Like.
Yeah, I was going to say our Cambrian episode, no way. It was chill because nothing was trying to eat us, but there was not much for us to eat.
Yeah, look at my vast algal farm, I don't think we would really be able to do much or to have like an actual civilization until at least the late Carboniferous or early Permian. So we could raise some temnospondyls. We have some foods. We don't have angiosperms yet, so we'd have to figure out a different crop food.
Yeah.
But like, I think that would probably be the earliest we could go back.
So you're talking about like
course,
agriculture, right? Domestication of plants and animals. And if is that like the ring seal of civilization? In which case, Carboniferous would be the place to be, right?
Yeah. I think that would probably be about as far, but it would look completely different than our civilizations today. Like, again, we would be raising temnospondyls and other amphibians and early amniotes for their eggs. Can you imagine going out? Amniotes. I'm going to go out to my lizard coop this morning and get my tiny little eggs.
No, thank you.
Going back to the would you want to have a civilization there? And again, methinks mayhaps no.
Yeah, and then when you get into like dinosaur times, you have bigger animals to grow and slaughter, but then you also have much bigger animals that could kill you and eat your entire civilization.
I feel like it's way more dangerous to have a sedentary society at that point, right? Like you'd want to move around unless you're like in a cave, I guess. I don't know.
I know.
Well, there really was a whole show on this called Terra Nova that came out, right? They went back in time to like save humanity, and it just shows you that that's not going to work. I mean, we're not adapted to that time period. Our people and the way that we can, modify the earth today, good or bad, like we'd have to adapt to a whole new ecosystem. Again, if we go back, a whole bunch of us go to start and we all just die from a new virus, right? It's like, why? This is one of those like, should we kind of questions.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's a fun thought experiment. That's for sure. It's a fun thought experiment. I'm kind of excited about this next question because us vegetarians are going to have to be a little creative with the answer. But Sprinting as Darkid would like to know, what extinct animal, I guess, or plant would you want to try eating the most? And what do you think it would taste like?
I mean, as a vegetarian, it's still hard because all the yummy little fruits and veggies we have are highly, highly developed, right? Like, even if you just go back in time, like, I don't know, a couple 100 years and look at what corn used to look like, not that exciting. So give me a second to come back on this, for I fear I am drawing a blank. I think I'm going to arrive time traveling with my fig bars or something.
Right? Yeah.
How about you meatitarians? You got any wishes?
I feel like we went over this quite a bit in some of our episodes, Callie. Like, we were always talking about, like, oh, are we going to try to eat the small sauropods on Hatzeg Island? Or, you know, the Arthropleura, then turn them into armor, right? And if I were going to eat something, honestly, it would be the giant mushrooms, the prototaxites, right? Like, I love
Mushrooms.
I love eating mushrooms today. Like, I love a good shiitake. I love a good king oyster. I like making like mapo tofu with mushroom. So I just feel like
bring
it would be
your
delicious.
wok and your oil.
Right?
Okay, wait. I'm scared though, because first I was like, brilliant, delicious. But then I remembered, again, I live in the Pacific Northwest, love to go foraging, but I do not forage mushrooms because I don't want to die. Because mushrooms are the kind of thing where, like, you take a bite of one wrong mushroom, goodbye.
But so Prototactites was around in the really early Paleozoic, and like there wasn't really anything that could eat it yet. Like it's
so
the
it had no
tallest,
reason to
biggest thing on
defend.
land. Yeah, so I'm wondering
Yeah.
if it would be safe because it hasn't developed the toxicity to
Right.
That's a good point.
to
Right.
fend off people that would
But
want
then
to eat
is
it.
it also just bland?
It could be. I guarantee it's very bland. And the other kind of caveat to that is we're
Why
not
do you guarantee?
still
How do you know it
100%.
doesn't taste like, we live in morel country. Like, how do you know it doesn't taste like morel or a truffle?
I just don't think it's going to. And we don't know if it's actually a fungus either. We're like 75%, I feel like, on if it is fungus
Really?
or
I didn't
not
know that.
fungus or something else. Like I don't know if anybody really knows what that
I don't know.
thing
Gabe
is.
really has me intrigued with the Paleozoic mapo tofu, though.
I would risk it. I don't think it's going to be toxic.
I'll risk my life for the mapo tofu.
You know, even though I'm a vegetarian, I think I would like to try like the common ancestor between mammals and reptiles to see if it would be more mammal tasting or more bird tasting. Like, what does a mammal bird taste like?
It's going to have definite umami.
I think gamey.
Doesn't sound delicious, but since we're getting to the amnio, it's like I want to sample a bunch of different eggs. I don't have high expectations for those eggs tasting good.
Oh.
But like if I bring
Interesting.
some toast and avocado and just kind of like do a little sample board of all the different eggs I can find, that could be fun.
Could you imagine like getting a sauropod egg?
Oh.
Like a sauropod egg.
That's how you feed that civilization. Dang.
Yeah.
Right.
That'd be kind of cool
Bruh.
to have a
Sauropod huevos rancheros?
Oh, yeah.
huge omelet. Yeah. How about you, Blake?
See, the problem is I eat meat, but I'm not a hunter. And so, but first thought was like, going back to the Pleistocene and like, what did humans hunt?
The adorable factor is going to be tough.
But-
yeah.
I just don't have the heart to eat them. I am curious about like a Coelophysis drumstick,
Ooh. Like a renifer, giant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is that's where my
Yeah.
hunger overcomes my
Giant
heart,
It
though.
would- if it were already killed and cooked. If someone else did that.
I'll do it. I'll help.
I would,
I'll cook.
it's crossed all of our minds, right? What do dinosaurs taste like?
All right, we're down to our last two questions now. And our next to last question comes from Jorge Mojica. How do we know where the continents were at specific time periods throughout our current eon? So the Phanerozoic eon is what we're in right now.
We've got lots of different lines of evidence.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 At least 5.
I mean, the first, perhaps the most obvious one, since we're a paleontology show, is look at where the fossils are and how they match up, right? Like we think about Pangea, and there are all these different animals where if you were to put together South America and Africa, which every kid knows looks like a little puzzle piece that belongs together, then that range of the animals makes sense. Otherwise, you would have to say these animals somehow got across these oceans in ways that don't make sense. And that's just looking at fossils, right? I think if we only had evidence from one line of reasoning, then it would make sense to be dubious. But then we can add on other lines of evidence, such as...
Yeah, so MB's talking about a fancy thing called paleobiogeography. So looking at the fossils across different geographical areas. But yeah, we have...
I think we did an episode about Alfred Wegener, right, who came up with the plate tectonics model, and one of his first papers was about exactly what MB is talking about. Like, that's weird. The fossils in Appalachia are the same as the Highland in Scotland.
Right, yeah.
You know?
And
so maybe they were connected. But at the time, the idea was completely ridiculed. You know? He was like laughed out of the establishment because it was inconceivable that land masses would move.
Yeah, he's one person I wish I could take in time. So he died before his theory was respected, I guess. To bring him in and be like, look, it's like the foundation of geology as we know it today.
I feel like that Doctor Who episode where they...
I know,
with Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Right?
It gets me,
Every
just
time.
thinking about it makes me want to cry. Oh gosh. I mentioned that
You just
the other day.
give him a hug,
Literally just talked about that. Another line of evidence that we have for where things were throughout the Phanerozoic is paleomag data. So we can look and see when these rocks solidified, and especially iron-bearing rock formations. And we can determine whether a rock was magnetized near the pole or near the equator. And so that kind of gives us kind of a latitudinal position, but does not constrain its east and west longitudinal position. But then there's the other one that is more familiar to myself, and that would be the linear magnetic anomalies. And so the Earth that we know that has a north and a south, those two directions can literally flip. And we have record of that in the rock, of these reversals, especially with the seafloor. As it's spreading out from the mid-Atlantic ridge, we have almost these bands of reversals, and we can literally just kind of track those reversals. And if you find one in your rock, you can match it up to another reversal, and it kind of gives you an idea of where it is.
That was my sister's master's thesis.
And that's igneous rock?
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's pretty cool. So
I think this is I was just going to say this is a really good point of how, like, let's say with the paleobiogeography, we know that, let's say South America and Africa used to be together, but did South America move towards Africa? Was Africa moving towards there? So if we bring in this other line of reasoning, then we can see, okay, were they closer to the equator? Were they closer to the north? So we're putting all those different lines of evidence together to make that complete picture.
For sure. Yeah, these are all used in concert with each other. They're all used together to help bolster our knowledge of where these things were. And the linear magnetic anomalies work for about at least the last 150 million years. So that's kind of nice. That takes us back quite a bit.
Because we know how often they flip and where the poles flip. And so we can sort of do that math to reverse engineer. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one
is igneous rock used for those magnetic anomalies?
Yeah, it would have to be igneous rock because that's molten rock, and basically all the minerals are floating around inside. There are certain minerals that are going to be magnetized, and we specifically like to look for like the long skinny ones because they're basically like a little needle pointing back and forth. And so if you look at like seafloor spreading, you can see like a bunch of rocks pointing this way with the little minerals, and then they're pointing that way and they flip back and forth.
And then we also have paleoclimatology, so looking at the past climate, trying to figure out where things were wet, when things were dry, near the tropics, near the poles. We can kind of look at all that data. And then just geological and tectonic history. So plates smash together, they spread apart, and they all leave evidence of those past movements as well. So we have quite a few ways of figuring out.
We can also look at rock types, right? So like when we think about like glaciations, there are certain types of rocks that only form when there are continental glaciers pushing them outwards and inwards. And just like we were connecting those lines of fossils, we can collect those lines of, in this case, like glacially carved rocks or moraines or whatever it might be. So there's so many different little like tick points all over the world that you're just matching up together.
I know. It's so cool. I love geology. It's so fun. All right. Let's do our last question here. Okay. Martin Booz. Last question. I asked this question and actually received an email back before, but I thought it might be fun to ask the question here and show the answer. Which evolutionary niche does humankind occupy? And are we the first to occupy aspects of it?
Oh, well, we're not apex predators. But in a way we kind of are. But
I mean,
if we were just on ourselves without the things we've created,
we're not.
Correct. But we, with these big brains, have created so many tools. And with our tools, one could argue, I mean, we're kind of destroying everyone. So,
any other thoughts on what evolutionary niche we are a part of right now?
That's an excellent question, though. I think, can we invent a new niche, like geoengineer? I think that's what we are. Like, we're engineering our environment. Like, it's us and beavers. We are the only two animals that have that game.
Yeah, we're pretty good. Us and like what, gopher tortoises or something are geoengineers. They make life easy for a lot of other animals. Yeah. Luckily, I have the email answer from Darcy. So I think she's the
Darcy
best to
would
answer
be the
this.
one to answer.
Yep. All right, here is her answer. It's a really great question. Like, I can say there are niches that we don't occupy, like flying around eating bugs or living in a rainforest canopy or the deep sea. But there's such a huge range of niches that we do or can occupy, even setting aside the ones we've built or created for ourselves. The defining a niche for us is hard. We're basically the ultimate adaptable generalists combined with being an ecosystem engineer, for better or worse. Thanks, Darcy.
Wow.
That got us together. Well, that was the last question. I want to thank all of our patrons, especially for sending in their questions, and everybody else to send in on questions. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast, and thanks to all my co-hosts for coming and doing some thought hypotheses with me today.
It's really fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was great being your companion, Dr. Callie.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into deep time, and a huge thanks for all your questions further probing our tours through prehistory. Be sure to join us next time when we talk to John Green about the Anthropocene and the future. And as always, you can find us telling more stories from our planet's past over at youtube.com/eons. This episode was written by Dr. Darcy Shapiro, fact-checked by me, Callie Moore, and hosted by me, Michelle Barboza-Ramirez, Blake DiPastino, and Gabriel Santos. It was edited by Chris Ankiko, and our sound design and mix was by Callie Dishman. The show is produced by Sarah Suda, our script editor is Dr. Paige Madison, and our editorial director is Dr. Darcy Shapiro. Our executive producers are Seth Radley and Hank Green. The executive in charge for PBS is Maribel Lopez, and John Campbell is PBS's Assistant Director of Programming. Eons Surviving Deep Time is a production of Complexly for PBS Digital Studios, and we are distributed by PRX. Until next time, you can always visit us over at youtube.com/eons for more stories from Deep Time.